The cubs trembled at the first crack of thunder. They slept peacefully beneath the human's outstretched arm. The storm came without warning on the forest moon of Valar Prime. The sky turned from soft purple to angry black in mere moments. The wind began to howl through the tall silver trees like a wounded beast. Lightning split the darkness, and then came the thunder. It was a sound so deep and so loud that the ground itself seemed to shake. Inside the small emergency shelter, 3 Valari cubs pressed themselves against the cold metal wall. Their large golden eyes were wide with pure terror. Their soft blue fur stood up in every direction. The smallest one, barely old enough to walk properly, let out a high-pitched whimper that broke the heart of anyone who heard it. These cubs were not supposed to be here. They were supposed to be safe in their village, surrounded by their pack, protected by the warmth of their family den. But the Civil War had changed everything. Their village was gone. Their parents were gone. Everything they knew had turned to ash and memory. The human named Marcus Chen sat on the opposite side of the shelter. He was a cargo pilot by trade, a simple man who moved supplies between distant worlds for modest pay. He had found these cubs 3 days ago, hiding in the ruins of a burning settlement. He had not planned to become their guardian. He had not asked for this responsibility. But when he saw those frightened eyes looking up at him from the rubble, he knew he could not walk away. Another crack of thunder exploded across the sky. The cubs screamed. The middle one, a female named Tira, according to the translator chip in his ear, began to cry openly. Thick tears rolled down her furry cheeks. The oldest one, a male called Ven, tried to be brave. He stood in front of his siblings with his small chest puffed out, but his legs were shaking so badly that he could barely stand. Marcus had seen many things in his travels across the galaxy. He had seen the great nebula of Orion burning with colors that had no names. He had walked on planets where the rain fell upward and the rivers flowed through the sky. He had met species so different from humans that communication seemed impossible. But he had never seen anything that moved him quite like the sight of these 3 small creatures trying to survive in a universe that had taken everything from them. The storm grew stronger. The shelter rattled and groaned under the assault of wind and rain. A particularly bright flash of lightning turned the darkness into blinding white for a split second. The thunder that followed was so powerful that Marcus felt it in his bones. The smallest cub could take no more. She broke away from her siblings and ran across the shelter. She did not run toward safety. She did not run toward the supplies or the door. She ran directly toward Marcus. Her tiny clawed feet scratched against the metal floor as she moved. Before Marcus could react, she had climbed into his lap and buried her face against his chest. Marcus froze. In all his training, in all his years of traveling among alien species, no one had ever taught him what to do in this moment. The Velari were a proud species. They were known throughout the sector for their fierce independence and their distrust of outsiders. For a Velari cub to seek comfort from an alien, from a human no less, was almost unheard of. But this small creature did not care about politics or history or the complicated relationship between their species. She only knew that she was scared. She only knew that the thunder was loud and the night was dark, and she wanted someone, anyone, to make her feel safe. Marcus slowly raised his hand. He hesitated for a moment, unsure if he was doing the right thing. Then he gently placed his palm on the cub's back. He could feel her small heart beating rapidly beneath her fur. He could feel her whole body trembling with each new rumble of thunder. He began to move his hand in slow circles. It was something his own mother had done for him when he was a child, back on Earth, during the summer storms that rolled across the plains of Kansas. He hummed a quiet tune, an old lullaby that he barely remembered. The words were lost to time, but the melody remained. The effect was immediate. The small cub's trembling began to slow. Her grip on his shirt loosened slightly. Her breathing, which had been quick and panicked, started to deepen and calm. The other two cubs watched this scene with expressions that were difficult to read. Their translator chips did not work on emotions, only words. But Marcus could see something changing in their golden eyes. The fear was still there, but something else was growing alongside it. Curiosity, perhaps, or maybe hope. Another crash of thunder shook the shelter. Tira let out a small cry and took a step forward. She stopped herself, looking uncertain. She glanced at her older brother as if asking for permission. Ven stood still for a long moment. He was the oldest. He was supposed to protect his sisters. He was supposed to be strong. Seeking comfort from a stranger, from an alien, went against everything he had been taught. But his sisters were scared. He was scared. And the human was warm, and his voice was gentle, and the storm showed no sign of stopping. Ven made his decision. He walked slowly across the shelter, his tail low and his ears flat against his head. When he reached Marcus, he did not climb into his lap like his youngest sister had done. Instead, he sat down beside the human and leaned against his side. It was a small gesture, but it meant everything. Tira followed immediately. She curled up on Marcus's other side, pressing her face against his arm. Now all three cubs were gathered around him like small planets orbiting a sun. Marcus adjusted his position carefully. He stretched out his left arm and wrapped it around Ven and Tira. His right hand continued to rub slow circles on the smallest cub's back. He was now supporting the weight of 3 alien children, 3 orphans who had every reason to hate his species, and yet had chosen to trust him in their moment of greatest fear. The storm continued to rage outside. The thunder kept coming, each crack seemingly louder than the last. But something had changed inside the shelter. The atmosphere was different now. The fear was still present, but it was no longer overwhelming. It was being held at bay by something stronger. Marcus kept humming his mother's lullaby. He did not know if Valari ears could even hear the frequencies he was producing. He did not know if the sound meant anything to these cubs or if it was simply noise. But it seemed to help. It seemed to give them something to focus on besides the chaos outside. Time passed slowly. The storm showed no sign of weakening. If anything, it grew more intense as the night wore on. But inside the shelter, something beautiful was happening. The trembling had stopped. The crying had ceased. One by one, the cubs began to relax. The smallest one was the first to fall asleep. Her tiny body went limp against Marcus's chest. Her breathing became slow and regular. Her small paws twitched slightly as she dreamed whatever dreams Valari cubs dream. Tira was next. She yawned widely, showing rows of small white teeth. Then her golden eyes fluttered closed, and she slumped against Marcus's side. Her tail curled around her body like a furry blanket. Ven held out the longest. He was fighting sleep with everything he had. His eyes would close for a moment, then snap back open as another roll of thunder passed overhead. He was still trying to be brave. He was still trying to protect his sisters. Marcus looked down at the young cub. In that moment, he saw something that transcended species. He saw a child who had been forced to grow up too fast. He saw someone who had lost everything and was desperately trying to hold on to what little remained. He saw himself many years ago after the accident that had taken his own parents. He shifted his arms slightly and pulled Ven closer. He leaned down and spoke softly. His translator chip converted his words into the musical language of the Valari. "Rest now," he said. "I will keep watch. I will keep you safe. That is my promise." Ven looked up at him with those large golden eyes. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then the cub nodded slowly. He pressed himself more firmly against Marcus's side and finally, allowed his eyes to close. Outside, the storm continued its assault on the small moon. Lightning painted the sky in shades of white and purple. Thunder rolled across the landscape like the drums of an angry god. Rain fell in sheets so thick that visibility dropped to almost nothing. But inside the shelter, there was peace. 3 small cubs slept soundly beneath the outstretched arm of a human who had become their protector. They did not stir when the thunder crashed. They did not whimper when the lightning flashed. They simply slept, dreaming of better days yet to come. Marcus stayed awake through the entire night. He did not move except to adjust his arm when it started to go numb. He watched the cubs sleep, and he listened to the storm, and he thought about the strange path that had brought him to this moment. He was not a hero. He had never wanted to be one. He was just a cargo pilot who happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Or perhaps, he was starting to think, he had been in exactly the right place at exactly the right time. When morning came and the storm finally passed, the cubs woke to find themselves still wrapped in the human's embrace. They did not pull away immediately. Instead, they stayed there for a few more precious moments, savoring the warmth and safety that they had found. The smallest cub looked up at Marcus with sleepy eyes. She said something in her native language, something that the translator chip rendered as, "Thank you for being our thunder shield." Marcus smiled. It was not a grand title. It was not the kind of recognition that would earn him fame or fortune, but it was enough. It was more than enough. He tightened his arm around the cubs and made a silent promise to whatever forces governed the universe. He would get these children to safety. He would find them a new home, a new family, a new chance at life. It would not be easy. The journey ahead was long and dangerous. But he would do it. Because that is what humans did. They protected, they sheltered, they became the calm in the storm for those who needed it most. The cubs had trembled at the first crack of thunder, but they had slept peacefully beneath his arm. And that, Marcus realized, was the most human thing of all.